The iMore Show is brought to you today by 1 Month, specifically 1 Month HTML. It is the easiest way to learn to code. It is 30 minutes a day for 30 days. You'll build an actual website starting from day one. You'll be welcomed into a community of 12,000 other students learning online. Now, here's what I'd like you to do. It's 1 Month HTML, 30 minutes a day, 30 days. You'll be able to code HTML and CSS on your own. Enrollment is typically $99, but if you join now, and you'll get a one-time discount of 25% off, and you'll be helping to support the iMore Show. So all you do is you go to www.onemonth.com/the iMore Show. That's www.onemonth.com/the iMore Show, and you will be building your own web pages. It is August 7, 2014. We have the rumored date for the iPhone 6 event. And we have, I guess, a bunch of other stuff that's happened. But the most important thing is we're all here together. This is the iMore Show. Joining me, as always, we have the managing editor of iMore.com and the kaiju of love, Peter Cohen. How are you, Peter?
I am well, Rene. How are you today?
I am doing very well, thank you. It is not too hot, not too cold. Ali maintains that I have 1 week of summer a year, but it looks like we might get to it this year, so I'm happy.
Excellent. Well, summer in Montreal, I've been there. It's a lovely place to be this time of year.
It is. We should get everyone together in Montreal for a hangout or something. Although Ali doesn't want to go to Canada, but I think she'll go in July or August maybe.
Well, it's not that she doesn't want to go to Canada. It's that Ali's not allowed to because of the terms of the restraining order, right, Ali?
Maybe. I don't want to talk about it.
That is the voice of our awesome editor, Ali Kazmu. How are you, Ali?
I am good.
You're good but anti-Canadian.
As long as we don't have to sit on a glacier, I guess I'll come to Canada.
Do the moose scare you? Is that what it is?
Maybe.
All right, so this week, John Pachowski of Recode, formerly of the Wall Street Journal, now of Recode, said that his sources are saying that the iPhone 6 event will be held by Apple in San Francisco or thereabouts on September 9th. That is not an unexpected day by any means. Back in January, I was hearing wink, wink, nudge, nudges, and I put up a post called iPhone 6 Release Date Roulette that said, that was the most likely date. Because that's typically, for the last 3 or 4 years, that's when Apple has held the iPhone event, ever since the iPhone 4S moved away from being a WWDC event to being a fall event. So I think that's entirely likely. It's within all the normal launch parameters. And if that holds true, it means we'll be seeing iOS 8 on or around August 17th and the iPhone 6 in stores on or around August 19th, because they typically ship the Friday after, 10 days later.
September?
Pardon me? September, yeah. 19th. I'll get there eventually, Ali.
You about gave me a heart attack.
All this to say, Peter, that things are unfolding exactly, that you're famous for your past is prologue line, but it seems to actually apply this time.
Yes, indeed. And it's good to see Apple, consistency is the hobgoblin of little minds, right? But it is good to see Apple apply some consistency here, because God knows there are a lot of little minds on Wall Street that would probably freak out if they didn't.
Is it ironic at all that Apple is so secretive about this, yet they have stuck to the same pattern for so many years? Like, do they do that just to troll the internet? I think they do.
I'm pretty sure, yes. Yeah. It's funny, speaking of trolls, I've got a theory now that whenever Apple or anybody else is trolling the internet, it's Emperor Palpatine giving Luke the whole "give in to your hate" speech in the background.
Everything is proceeding according to my designs. You'll find this iPhone is fully operational. And then it's all faith in your friends is yours, and it goes to hell from there.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think, Ali, that's a perfectly reasonable time frame. I mean, iOS 8 looked like it's coming along skippingly. We got beta 5 this week?
Yeah, I was timing that out the other day in my head. That's about right, because we normally seem to get about 6, maybe 7 betas before Goldmaster.
Yeah, although recently they've been releasing one and then waiting an awful long time and then suddenly doing the Goldmaster. They've been skipping that last beta, it seems.
Yeah.
Well, I am ready. The rumors, again, of course, a 4.7 inch, a 7.4 inch iPhone, that'd be impressive. A 4.7 inch iPhone with a 5.5 inch iPhone either being announced but released later or being actually announced and released later. We've talked about that in depth. One of the rumors that's rearing its head again is NFC in an iPhone. Now, Apple has prototyped NFC in the iPhone previously. I think the iPhone 4 had a prototype with NFC. iPhone 4S did. iPhone 5, several of those did at least. And Apple always ended up not including it in the final model because for them, Bluetooth Low Energy was the proximity radio of choice. This could be just once again Apple always prototyping it, just like they like to be ready for any possible contingency, and it could be pulled again at the last minute, never show its head. But I wonder, like America seems to be at the same time a technological superpower, but you guys are so far behind when it comes to commerce and banking coming into the modern era. Like I paid, I think I said the story before, I picked up some friends, I picked up some friends, we'll just call them, at the airport, and I was driving around, I went to get gas, and I tapped my credit card to pay, and they said, "What is this, Canadian magic?" And it's just NFC that the rest of the world enjoys, but Peter, for some reason, you Americans hate with a vengeance.
Yeah, it's really funny too because I mean we've had NFC kiosks in various retailers for years. It's just that the banks have been very reluctant to get it into play. I suspect it's a combination of concern over consumer familiarity with the technology. The cost and logistics involved in reissuing credit cards that actually have the smart chips embedded in them. Compliance, regulation, any bureaucratic inertia that can slow any process down in the United States, we are masters at sort of wallowing in.
Well, a lot of that's going to change, but I think it's before fall of 2015. Like for fraudulent charges, a lot of the liability is going to be put on banks. So I know a lot of them are pushing to get NFC or chip and PIN cards out to consumers. So I'm seeing a lot more NFC capable, basically kiosks around us, and I'm seeing more people using them paired with like Android phones. I know vendors like ISIS gave a big push to that. You sign up for an ISIS account with an American Express Serve card, will give you $50 to spend however you want. You use it at a Coke machine, it like gives you $1 back. So they're pushing it. I think it's probably coming sooner than later with bank cards because they have to, because banks don't want to be liable for fraudulent charges, which is what'll happen. I got one card in the mail last month. I think it was a Citi card that had chip and PIN in it, which was weird. It's the first one I've gotten with that.
Chip and PIN makes me hungry like fish and chips.
That goes exactly to my point, though, which is that banks aren't really, or haven't had any incentive to do it because the regulation hasn't been there. Now that the regulation is in place, and now that a deadline is looming, they're moving. But instead of just doing the right thing before, they were happy with status quo.
I had a friend in the UK when we were over there tell me, you guys don't, you can just swipe your card and use it as credit with no passcode. That's crazy. If someone on the street knew that, they'd beat you up for that card because you can't do that here. You have to have a PIN to use the card.
Well, I mean, the nice thing is that at restaurants, you don't have to give your card to a waiter who then disappears with it. They bring a little wireless machine to your table. You stick the card in. Well, either you tap the card or you stick the card in. And I can use the NFC payments, the tap to pay, at my gas station, at my bank, at McDonald's, at my supermarket. I mean, it just works everywhere.
I saw that over there too, and I was amazed by that, and it just really kind of did hit home, like, wow, we can't do any of this. Like, I can't go into any store and make a transaction without having a physical debit card unless it's like Starbucks or one of those vendors I can use.
It does scare me, though, Allie, because if I ever dropped my card at the gas station, someone could get, $100 of gas or something off of it. All I have to do is tap it. There's no security requirement there.
You just wave your credit card and poutine appears. You truly live in a magic place, Rene.
So magical. So yeah, again, and I want to point out the article that a lot of this was based on this morning was from an outlet. I won't name them, but it said exclusive confirmed in it, and it's not confirmed until Apple has it up on stage, demonstrates it, and puts it out in a press release. So I always take those articles with especially large grains of salt. But I think the underlying technology is interesting to talk about anyway. Like another one of the claims, Peter, is 802.11 AC Wi-Fi, and that many of us were expecting last year, given that the Mac line and the airport line moved to AC last year.
Yeah, indeed. And if I understand correctly, Rene, the reason why it didn't happen is because of power consumption issues related to the radio that's needed for that. Am I correct in assuming that?
I believe they didn't. I don't know if even the chipset that they used was capable of AC. I think they might have kept. I know they increased the LTE bands, but I don't know if they even included the functionality on the chipset.
So AC is overdue, and I'm willing to bet that an update to Airport Express can't be far behind if that's the case.
Yeah, that's that's the old router in Apple stable.
Right, exactly.
Isn't they updated the Extreme?
Yeah.
But
Yes.
the Express never got an update.
Right, exactly. So, it'd certainly be nice to see. 802.11 AC isn't widely deployed, either publicly or, even in homes. I mean, there's a growing number of 802.11 AC routers that are available now. And, of course, Apple didn't necessarily lead the charge last year, but popularized it when they brought out the revamped Airport Express when the new Haswell-based MacBook Pros first started shipping last spring. But clearly 802.11 AC has momentum behind it, so it'll be nice to see.
And it's interesting because the only reason I had doubts, Peter, is that AD seemed on the spec sheet awfully fast for the AC standard to get a lot of legroom because N was out for a long time and BG, all those had their time in the sun. But AD doesn't seem to be coming as fast as I guess some of the people wanted. So I think it's more the whole point about this is race to sleep. Like if you can transfer your data faster, you can power down the radio faster. And even though some people think faster means more energy, actually keeping the radio running to transfer data over a longer period of time overall uses more energy. So if you can transfer and race to sleep again, you're laughing. And that's why the other rumor, which is like 2 gigahertz Apple A8 chip, always makes me suspicious because the problem is not always the speed. Apple can make these chips super fast. The problem is they're in a very small package with a giant battery, and batteries are good at providing power, but they're also huge insulators. And that means that the thermals get out of control really quickly, and you have to ramp down. And we saw that, for example, the iPhone 5S, the A7 chipset can run at a fast speed much shorter periods of time than it can in the iPad, which has because it's a larger size, can dissipate thermal energy better. But even the iPad, it has to ramp down quickly. And even if it's 2 gigahertz, and either of you guys correct me if I'm wrong, that's probably a burst speed, and using it to play a game or something, it's going to go down fast.
Probably. I think Apple saw some issues even with the 64-bit and the 5S. I've talked to several people, both geniuses, and I had an issue with my first 5S. It would overheat, like if I was playing a game or doing something that was graphics intensive, and my screen started making like this clicking noise when I would push down on it. I guess they had to reevaluate the adhesive that they were using because it would actually start not melting but becoming kind of soft, and once your phone cooled off, that clicking would stop. But it would do it, and the phone I have right now does it if my phone gets really hot. So I could see that being an issue.
Yeah, I mean, again, it has to be viewed as an entire product. You can't just say, oh, Apple should add. The 64-bit also created a problem because of RAM. The 1 gigabyte of RAM in the iPhone 5S was not as good with 64-bit processors as it was with everything else. And that's another thing that people really want is 2 gigabytes of RAM in an iPhone 6. And I would love that, but what's the power demands versus the performance improvements? And they weigh all of that down to the last tiny atom and ounce of energy. The last sort of funniest rumor is that Beats will get special privileges because now they're an Apple company, and maybe there'll be some magic pairing with Beats headphones or magic capabilities with Lightning. And Ali, I mean, I like the idea. I always think that Apple always tries to make the best. Like if they own Beats, they'll make the best Beats experience be the one with Apple devices. But I'm not sure what I can imagine that would be that special that you could attain by having both a Beats headset and an iPhone. I mean, it's not like they can make the music better, can they?
No, I think part of the problem with the headphone line is too, you can't. Audio for a lot of people is a very, very personal preference. It's not, your ears are different than mine or different than Peter's. I hate Beats audio. I don't like it. I've never liked the quality. I think the bass is way overcompensated. The headphones traditionally have been way out of what I think they should be priced at. I like the sound quality of Bose. I know a lot of people like Sennheiser and other brands. So I think giving special privilege, even if they own a line, I don't know. I know more people that dislike Beats than like it. So I can't see them doing that. I don't know. I can't see that happening.
Peter, any thoughts?
I'm with Allie. I own Beats. I own the first generation of Studios. I wasn't impressed with their build quality then. I'm not impressed with their build quality now. I can't dispute though that a lot of people like to wear them. Every time I'm out, I see people with them around their necks, and they personalize them. They get individual colors that suit them better. Beats diversified its product line as well. So the question is how would Apple add value to that in a way that makes it not necessarily unique for Apple customers, but encourages people who are using Beat products to think about Apple the next time they want to upgrade their phone or get a new handheld device. That is a question I just don't have an answer to, and I'm not sure that Apple's really given us. I don't think Apple's given us any indication whatsoever of what its plans are there.
I think the only thing that comes to mind is sort of like how the Mac and the iPhone can now do that instant tethering, is that if Beats gets heavily into the wireless side of headphones and there was a trusted relationship between Beats and Apple that was even easier to pair than a traditional Bluetooth headset, maybe that's interesting, but I don't know how valuable that actually is.
Yeah, I mean, Beats Music seems to be the most obvious answer to, how is Beats going to improve things with Apple somehow. But headphones, I just, I don't know.
All right, so we asked, what's your next dream Mac? Because there's rumors, and I'll get to those rumors in a second, but what is your next dream Mac was the question. I found these answers really interesting. So Retina MacBook Air was in the, actually, no, it's been beat now. So a hybrid MacBook Air, iPad Air is actually the 33% of people's dream Mac. So an ARM-based, iOS-running MacBook Air that you could yank the keyboard off of and use as an iPad Air. So basically,
just buy a Surface.
Or buy an iPad Air with a Logitech keyboard. I mean, that's essentially it at that point. The second most requested is the Retina MacBook Air, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. But as far as we know, that's still waiting on Broadwell. That is the rumor has it, as far as we know, that's an actual Apple product that we will see, but it's waiting on Broadwell, which, Peter, have they pushed that off officially to 2019 yet?
No, Broadwell's coming before the end of the year. The question is whether or not the Broadwell chips that are first going to emerge from Intel in time for the holidays this year are the ones that Apple wants to use in the mythical Retina MacBook Air, or whether Apple would wait for other chips to come out in 2015. One way or the other, probably not until closer to the end of the year, or maybe in time for the holiday season, but just.
That's why I find this product so fascinating, is because right now you can choose between the massive battery life of a 13-inch MacBook Air or the high-density pixels of a Retina MacBook Pro. But there's no sort of best of both worlds or no compromise. And a Retina MacBook Air, whether they call it that or they call it a new generation MacBook Pro, whatever, something that has high density but also is also light and hugely portable, is that best of both worlds, or is that the worst of two products? I don't know how that's going to be yet.
My sense is that there is certainly a demand for it. People when I work at the retail store on the weekends, one of the questions that comes up with our customers over and over again is, so does this MacBook Air have a Retina display? Because it's a selling point of the MacBook Pro line, and people want to know if it's something they can get on the MacBook Air. So I think that there's an incentive for Apple to answer that group of people. The question is, what kind of compromises is it going to have? Because it is going to have compromises. Now, the MacBook Air has always had terrific portability. It's had increasingly spectacular battery life over the past couple of generations. Assuming that Apple wants to continue to do the battery life thing, they're going to have to keep the clock speed of the CPU down. And one of the reasons, Rene, that we say that Broadwell is necessary here is because Broadwell dramatically improves integrated graphics performance compared to the Haswell chips, which in and of themselves are not slouches in the graphics department. But when you are pushing that many pixels on a screen, as you are in the scaled resolution of a Retina display, you do need a fair amount of graphics horsepower to be able to do it. It's always a compromise. You can have graphics speed, but you're going to use more power. So Broadwell, and the fact that Broadwell uses a different manufacturing process, a smaller transistor size from 22 nanometers to 14, means that the chip isn't going to generate as much heat. It's not going to use as much power, but it's still very efficient and it's still able to do a lot of spectacular things. So, my expectation is that if it is going to be a MacBook Air that we're talking about here, Apple's got to balance it. Apple's got to keep it a MacBook Air like we know and love, just with a really terrific screen. The trouble that Apple runs here, of course, is alienating or cannibalizing potential sales of the MacBook Pro with Retina display. But Tim Cook has been asked about cannibalization when it comes to iPad versus Mac and other stuff in the past, and he says as long as they're buying Apple products, he doesn't really care. So maybe I'm just making out problems that don't really exist.
No, but I think I've heard about the Retina MacBook Air for years, and that was previously, I believe, they were trying with it on the Haswell platform. They just couldn't get the battery life they wanted, and really is dependent on Broadwell to be shipped. But that for many people, because one of the biggest questions, one of our Peter has written about this a lot of times. One of the biggest questions we get asked is, should we get the 13-inch MacBook Air or the 13-inch MacBook Pro? And people have almost as much trouble choosing between those as they do between the Retina iPad Mini and the iPad Air. And if Apple can make a device that makes a lot of those people happy in the middle, then that debate goes away, and hopefully eventually the product line gets simplified. We have that odd duck, the one old Mac Pro with the only optical drive left. We have that other odd duck, the one 15-inch Retina MacBook Pro with the discrete graphics cards. But those
don't say bad things about that machine.
I'm not. It's just the last one left. It is the only. If you want a discrete graphics card on a Mac, the high-end 15-inch is your only choice now.
On a MacBook, yeah. I mean, discrete graphic cards abound, on the desktop side, but you're absolutely right about that. So, yeah, it's an interesting thing, and the funny thing is the 13-inch segment of Apple's MacBook Pro line, and I've written about this before too, is Apple's most crowded product segment, right? Because you've got the 13-inch MacBook Air, you've got the 13-inch MacBook Pro with SuperDrive installed inside the old Ivy Bridge model that came out in 2012. You've got the 13-inch MacBook Pro with Retina display. So, the idea of Apple wedging another 12 or 13-inch model in here seems bizarre, but that's where all the light and heat are. Those are the machines that people are buying. The 11-inch, remains a good choice for people who are very budget conscious, or some people who are buying a laptop for a kid, especially
for Jim Dalrymple.
Kid. Jim uses an 11-inch, doesn't he?
Yeah, it's one of the most spectacular sights. I walk into Moscone or somewhere and I see Jim Dalrymple in all his bearded glory with the world's tiniest computer in front of him.
Well, the funny thing is, in Jim's case, the 11-inch MacBook Air can actually hide in the beard, so it makes it, it's very suitable for him. I actually used a MacBook Air for a couple of years before I started at iMore, and it was a very good machine, and that machine is still in use. That machine still, my 19-year-old uses it now. So the 11-inch MacBook Air, but the 11-inch MacBook Air is kind of an odd duck in the same way that the 15 is. People get their hands on it, and not everybody likes the form factor, even though Apple's done as much as possible to make it a really good usable machine. The screen is an odd aspect ratio compared to other MacBooks. Some people are actually put off by the smaller size, even though, ironically, if you overlay a MacBook Air, an 11-inch MacBook Air on top of any other MacBook, the screen, the keyboard size and the trackpad size is the exact same. Mm-hmm. I think that a lot of people are gun-shy about getting the MacBook Air 11-inch, not because of any innate problem with the 11-inch MacBook Air, but because they've been burned by netbooks in the past, and they're afraid of getting a really tiny machine because they can remember, getting bad wrist cramps trying to work on a netbook.
Or the shattered plastic of Asus just lying all over there.
Yeah, I think I've got 2 of those corpses lying around here someplace.
All right, I'll polish off these results, and I'm going to ask you guys your opinion. So after the Retina MacBook Air, the next most popular is the 4K iMac with close to 17%, then a 4K Thunderbolt display to go with the Mac Pro at around 10%. And this shocked me, given how much geek love I see for it. Only 8.5% of people want a Haswell Mac Mini. Ali, what is if you had to buy a new Mac next year, what would you want?
I'm actually waiting right now. I have a 13-inch Haswell MacBook Air right now, and I came from a 15-inch MacBook Pro before that. And I think when I do most of my work on a 27-inch iMac and I go down to 13 inches, it feels really small to me. So I think I'm an odd duck there. My next computer will probably be a 15-inch Retina display MacBook Pro. I'm holding out hope that maybe we'll see something else before the end of the year, even though I probably know better than that. But I don't know. I would like, I guess, a 15-inch MacBook Air. It's probably not going to happen. I just feel like maybe it's just my eyes, but I strain with the MacBook Air with the 13-inch.
When you're out and about at Starbucks or something working?
Yeah, I love the battery life. Yeah, that's what I take with me. I can forget to charge that thing for days and, open it up and not have to worry about it dying on me. But I want that battery life in 15 inches.
With a Retina display.
Yes.
The laws of physics, Ali. What about you, Peter?
Well, Rene, it's probably no surprise to you, but I'm in the lowly 8.5%. That voted for the Haswell Mac Mini. I would love to see a refreshed Mac Mini because I adore the Mac Mini and I think it's a fantastic machine, and I want to see Apple continue with it. At this point, though, I wonder if Apple will even bother to make the Haswell switch, or if they'll just wait until 2015 and come out with a Broadwell machine, or even a Skylake machine. It just it doesn't seem to. It seems to make a less and less sense to refresh that Mac Mini as time goes on.
There was a brouhaha on the interwebs when Apple accidentally listed a mid-2014 Mac Mini on one of their support documents.
Yes, indeed they did. They put it on their support database, and if I remember right, it was the matrix of
Boot Camp or something.
Boot Camp machines.
Yeah.
And, it appeared briefly, and then, of course, Apple edited it to take it off, I think. I don't make too much of that. Apple makes mistakes, just like everybody else does. They're not flawless.
They're human. How dare they?
How dare they be?
We're going to take a quick break, and I'm going to tell you about lynda.com. Lynda.com helps you learn and keep up to date with your software, pick up brand new skills, or explore new hobbies with their easy-to-follow video tutorials. Whether you want to learn how to make the most of your Apple devices and apps, edit video footage using Final Cut Pro 10, or build an iOS app, lynda.com offers thousands of video courses in a variety of topics. There's over 2,400 courses to be exact, all by industry experts, and with more being added weekly. It's one low monthly price. It's $25, and that gives you unlimited access to the entire lynda.com arsenal of videos. Lynda.com also just recently released a new iPhone and an iPad app. It's redesigned for iOS 7. It includes a more visual, more intuitive interface and offers offline courses and video viewing. That makes it easy and convenient to learn even in environments without internet access. And you can seamlessly switch between mobile and desktop applications. There are new courses like Getting Things Done, 1Password Fundamentals, Advanced Google AdWords Tips and Tricks, Mobile Marketing Fundamentals, Managing Your Mobile Photos, Final Cut Pro, Logic Pro, Adobe Creative Cloud, Microsoft Office, and more and more. It is safe to assume that if there is a major software application or operating system or major subject of technology in general, lynda.com most assuredly or almost always has you covered, and they're really quick to get this stuff out too. When a new thing is announced, for example, when Yosemite comes out, I'm assuming they're going to have training going really, really fast. Best of all, we've managed to work out a special deal with lynda.com to provide you with access to the entire library for free for 7 days. All you have to do is visit lynda.com/iMore to start your 7-day free trial. That's lynda.com/iMore. One more time, lynda.com/iMore. I want to thank them for supporting us, and I want to thank you for supporting them. All right, so we're going to tabulate up all the results, and we'll have our usual results post up tomorrow. So if you haven't voted yet and you hear this before we do that, please do go and vote and leave a comment, because we actually include comments in the articles, which is all shades of awesome. I took a look at iMessage in iOS 8 this week because Apple's put a lot of work into it recently. And actually, it ended up being way longer. When I actually went through and mapped out everything that they'd done, it took me a lot longer than I anticipated. I think it was like 2,000 some odd words. But what they're doing is really interesting, and I'm not sure all about it because I am old. And I accuse Peter of being old today because because of desktop, remote desktop, but I am old. When I use Line or I use one of those clients where you touch a sticker and it sends immediately, I get a panic attack because I'm from the generation where you made lots of embarrassing mistakes in text, and the ability to wait and press a send button was paramount to making sure you minimize those mistakes. But Apple is going all in on this. On the new version of iOS 8, you hold your finger down on the microphone button and you start talking, and you get this new radial interface, and you just slide your finger up and it sends, or you slide it over and cancel it. Or you hold your finger down on the camera button and it goes into selfie mode, and you can just slide your finger up to take a selfie or slide it across to take a video. And when you add certain things to it, it's no longer insert and then it's inside the little pocket of the iMessage text entry field, and then you press send. It just goes. You take a photo from your camera roll, which is now called recent photos or something, much to Ali's chagrin. But you press that, you get a big thumbnail, you hit it, it says you want to send this picture, you say yes, and it sends. So Ali, this is the Snapchat / Messenger generation, and I'm not sure my nerves can take it.
I'm young and I don't like it. So I was kind of taken aback when I was going to send a picture to someone, and it pulled up, the new little photo viewer, and you can select your photos. And I tapped on one, and I was like, whoa. Like, it just sent it. Like, I didn't have an option to, select more, or it just sent it.
I accidentally sent my location to Georgia yesterday when I was just testing out messages, and I was aghast because for location, for example, I want double, triple privacy checks before I tell somebody where I am.
You accidentally sent me a voice memo one time, too.
Yeah. Sorry about that.
What was this? It was like just pocket noise. I don't know what it was. Yeah, the location stuff was interesting to me, too, because I noticed that you can actually choose which device you want your location to be broadcasted from, and I can't wait for kids to figure that out when they're supposed to be at home and they just set their iPad as the location device, and then they're on their iPhone out and about somewhere else. So that's kind of weird to me that you can have multiple devices and then just choose only one to broadcast your location at all times. So
the whole thing is going to take some getting used to. The best thing about it, though, is it does, well, there's two things that are really cool. One is this new radial interface. So basically you touch and hold, and a circle spreads out from where you're touching, and there's different commands right along the circle, and you can slide up, for example, to send. You can slide left to cancel or to switch modes. And it's really interesting. And one of the reasons I find it interesting, Peter, is we've been talking about these larger size devices for a while, and people who like the small devices panic and say, no, Apple's about one-handed ease of use. But one-handed ease of use can be a software thing, too. And when you look at raise to Siri, or you look at the universal back swipe gesture, and now you look at this, it seems like Apple is coming up with software methods for one-handed use.
Yes, indeed. Thank God. And I'm sure that all the masturbators out there are very happy about that, too.
This is why I can't have nice podcasts, Peter.
One-handed use is great. I think that it's an important thing, regardless of how big the phone actually gets. So, in that respect, I think that it's good, but more than that, Apple's looking to just improve, I think, accessibility on these devices. Even though, as far as I'm concerned, they've been way out ahead on that for some time. But anything that they can do to make the user experience easier for people who have more limited mobility is an important thing.
The one thing I did like about this is that when I get scared of these interfaces, because interfaces, especially new ones, especially ones where you have a consequence like instantly sending things that creates stress, and I pulled my finger off at one point because I couldn't see what was underneath it anymore. And in one case it was a cancel button, in another case I think it was a shutter button. I don't remember exactly, but I pulled it off, and the interface stays there. and you can look at it and you can sort of orient yourself and say, okay, if I go up, it's this. If I go left, you can take your time and get used to it. And that de-stressed the entire thing for me. I think if it disappeared when my finger came off, I would have just stopped using it.
Sounds legit.
That would be, but I'm glad Apple thought of that. Some of the other stuff that they have included besides tap to talk and tap to selfie is raise to listen and talk, and this is pretty cool. One of my friends has iOS 8 installed, and I got a message from him, and it was a question about an iPhone case, and underneath the voice message it said raise to listen, and I just brought it up to my ear and it starts playing the voice message. Take it away from my ear, it pauses. Bring it back, it resumes again. And when the message is finished, that raise to listen switches to a raise to speak, and you can actually raise it up and start talking. It'll dictate the message for you, and you pull it back down and it's ready to send it. And that, again, like you talked about accessibility, Peter, I mean that's very easy to use, but it's also very rapid. Like you can very easily send messages back and forth without having to do all the typing and tapping and stuff like that. And Ali, it's another one-handed thing. I can walk down the street, I can hold a bag in my one hand, and I could literally send you voice messages back and forth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. And I think part of that, it seems like they integrated raise to speak at an OS level where it's not just system-wide, you have to be on the home screen or something else. I noticed that I think it was gone in settings, so it just seems like it's where it needs to be when it needs to be there. So
it's gone from Siri, so they took it away from Siri and they put it in the messages settings.
Yeah, and it seems like it's there throughout apps that it needs to be there, but I can't tell you how many people would, go to play a voicemail and they'd raise their phone and, it didn't play and it would activate Siri. So problems like that are gone because you can't do that anymore. It's not there. So, you show people how to deactivate raise to speak and then it's gone altogether. So at least now it's where it needs to be and then it's not activating itself where it shouldn't be.
And it even works in the lock screen. So like if you see a notification of a voice message, you can raise to speak and raise to listen and all that too. And the other thing that's really cool, Ali did, I forget how long ago it was, but Ali was basically, I'm fed up with messages taking up all the space on my iPhone. You people suck, fix this. And they fixed it. They did it in an interesting way though, because I think when you wrote about it, we talked about stopping duplication by using iCloud as a single store of a source image. Mm-hmm. But what they did now is for all messages you can set keep forever or keep for 1 year or keep for 1 month. But for voice messages and video or photo messages specifically, you can set it to keep them or to automatically delete them after 2 minutes. But instead of having to worry about, like, oh, maybe I'm going to lose one that was really important to me, even if you set it to delete after 2 minutes, there's a little keep button underneath. So if it's an important message to you, you can just hit that keep button and it'll stay there. I thought that was really nice.
Yeah, I do like those improvements, and I think it's a nice compromise between all or nothing. So I'm happy with that. We'll see how it is in real world practice once it's used by the masses. But yeah, that was probably my biggest issue with iOS was just the amount of storage that was taken up by the Messages app, and people just didn't know. It's where's all my storage going? Well, you have thousands of pictures because you never delete your messages, and now you're gonna have to weed through and find them.
I had 3 gigs of Casey List animated GIFs, I'm certain.
Yeah, I think my Messages app, the first time I looked, I think it was over 7 gigs.
Easy.
So.
One of my other favorite, I have so much I love about this app. Peter, I'm sure you've been there. You're part of a group conversation that you didn't ask to be part of. Someone sends you a bunch of texts, and then a bunch of chatty chatters decide to keep replying to each other, and your pocket is beeping and buzzing, and there's nothing you can do. You're sitting there in a state of learned helplessness while the phone basically gets taken over by some outside power. And now you can not only name a group, so for example, if there's a group with me, Peter, and Ali, I could call it the iMore Editors group and keep it as a persistent iMessage group. But also you can leave a group conversation at any time. You just press the leave button. Or if you don't want to leave it, if it's important, but you don't want to deal with what's happening right now, you can do not disturb just that conversation. I am so happy.
Now with iMessage, you have the ability to do what you do in real life, which is walk away from a conversation that you don't want to be part of. Thanks, Apple. That's progress.
They've unmaddeninged it.
Yeah, exactly.
It's very much like, I think back in April I wrote about a jailbreak tweet called Aki by Cyrenix, and it's very, very similar. That was, I think, one of the first apps I've seen that added the do not disturb option for individual threads. You could basically do exactly what you're doing in the iOS 8 Messages app, so added quick reply, stuff like that too. So That is very helpful. I think that being able to leave group conversations will probably be one that I think will be a lot of people's favorite feature.
Yeah, there's a couple of things, like you have the interactive notifications now, so you can respond to a text message inside the notification. You don't have to go out. There's also location sharing. There's two kinds. And actually, this goes to a bigger problem. Previously in iOS, if you wanted to send a voice message or share your location or something like that, you had to leave the Messages app. You had to go to Voice Memo or to Maps. You had to record the voice message, or you had to find your location. Then you had to use the share sheet to share it. So it worked, but it was a lot of work. And now you can just record and send from the Messages app. You can just share your location from the Messages app. You still have to leave to share other kinds of data. It's not all in the Messages app, but it's a huge improvement. And they also took some of the Find My Friends functionality, codenamed Grenada, and they put that into the messaging app. So, for example, if Peter and Allie and I are in a group message, I can see that Peter's, in Cape Cod, traveling on his way to Dunkin' Donuts for a morning refresh, or I can see Allie is in the supposed town of, I forget what it is, something like Michigan, Indiana, Chicago, California, America.
I'm going to make a note right now to turn that off in our thread.
Because it makes absolutely no sense where she's located within the United States. But yeah, so all of that stuff is rolled up. So it's not like BBM level yet, or like the highly this part killed me. The guy who created WhatsApp complained that Apple was stealing all his features, when the only reason WhatsApp exists is that he could clone every feature of BBM and make it cross-platform. But he's got $9 million if he doesn't care what I think about his app. So whatever. But yeah, it's pretty good, Peter, and it looks pretty good on the Mac too.
Yes, it does. Yes, it does.
Good messaging coming soon.
Good messaging coming soon, and the more transparent that Apple makes it between Mac and iOS, I think is a good thing, as we've discussed before.
I agree. So something else we discussed before, but decided to come back because Jean-Louis Gasset, formerly of Apple, formerly of BOS, brought it up, is this idea of putting the OS X or putting the Mac on ARM, Peter.
Yeah, I always love it when somebody who has credibility because of their past experience says a really stupid thing. And that's, as far as I'm concerned.
Everybody reblogs it.
Yeah, everybody reblogs it. And I admit that I used it as sort of the basis for an editorial that I posted this week. But look, when the A7 processor came out last year, Apple marketed the iPhone and the iPad Air and the iPad Mini with Retina display as having a desktop class processor. It's part of their basic marketing materials for these things. And that's fine and dandy. Yes, 64 bits is desktop, is the same type of processor that we find in our desktop machines. But there's a load of difference between an ARM processor and a general computing processor, like which is a system on a chip processor, and a general computing processor like the Intel chips that you find in Macs. So we've discussed this before, Rene. I suspect that just as you do, that Apple somewhere in the bowels of its skunkworks in Cupertino has Mac prototypes running on ARM chips. I don't think that they're ready for prime time, and I don't, as Gasset suggests, think that the end is nigh for Apple's partnership with Intel. It seems like a lot of the discussion, not just from Gasset but from others, about Apple switching to ARM has been predicated on this delay that Apple and other PC vendors have seen with Intel's release of Broadwell microprocessors. But I think it's really kind of a false equivalency that people are setting up, because, yeah, Intel has had some growing pains switching their manufacturing process to be able to produce the new Broadwell chips in the sort of yields that they're talking about. But it's not like Intel is dramatically behind the curve compared to other chip fabricators like TMSC or Samsung, for that matter. 14 nanometers is cutting edge technology. It's something that
it's bleeding edge.
It's bleeding edge technology, indeed. So it's something that we've got to cut Intel some slack here. And Intel hasn't been hugely late with the Broadwell processors. It's just had to shift its manufacturing plans a few months. And I don't think a few months is going to kill Apple or anyone else. But, you know, if you are in front of a Mac Pro, let's say, or if you are in front of a fully loaded MacBook Pro or iMac, and you are doing heavy video editing and color correction and you know, video effects and all the other stuff that you do with your Mac, and you watch an i7 processor that has 4, 8 cores, 12 cores, just get hammered constantly with the stuff that you're doing, you realize how laughable it is at the idea of Apple just throwing Intel out tomorrow and replacing it with an ARM chip in the Mac. The other practical reason I think that Apple isn't going to be switching to Intel or switching away from Intel anytime soon is because ever since the first Macs began shipping with Intel chips back in 2006, it's been an increasing selling point to the Mac, especially in the past few years, that it can run Windows. This is a big thing for consumers. This is a huge thing for enterprise and institutions. You know, having an Intel chip inside makes it much easier for the Mac to run Windows than it can otherwise. It can do it virtually using virtual machine software like VMware Fusion or Parallels Desktop. It can do it natively using Boot Camp and some EFI trickery that Apple's come up with there that makes the Mac appear to a Windows computer to be, you know, or a Windows operating system software to be just yet another Windows computer. So, you know, these are all good things for Apple's widespread adoption with the Macintosh, and we've seen the Mac, you know, become increasingly important for people to buy. Apple moving to a radically different architecture would complicate that. It'll complicate things for developers. It will complicate things for consumers who are trying to buy software. So I just don't see it happening anytime soon. I think at some point it's feasible. I just don't think it's something that's going to happen tomorrow.
Yeah, and I think it's important to understand, and I wrote this a few months ago, that Apple prototypes everything. Like almost any logical thing that you could say Apple should be thinking of this, they are, and they've tried it. Like touchscreen Macs, they tried it, decided they didn't like it. It's not that they make uninformed decisions or just throw things out radically. They just say, they try these things. And to your point, when they switched from PowerPC to Intel, they gained PC compatibility. They gained access to Intel's chipsets. Next Step already had ports, you know, running on x86. It wasn't a fundamental switch. They got an established PC architecture to go with their products. ARM doesn't have any of that. Apple would have to build all of that out, and that takes a lot of time. And you'd have to start asking questions. Does it run iOS? You know, would people be happy running iOS apps? Do you have to emulate OS 10 apps? How would you do PC emulation? That would probably be running a virtual machine too. How well do ARM chips handle virtualizing other operating systems? How much power, how much performance is there in that? So many questions that I think it's really easy to write a sentence saying Apple should or should Apple. But the reality, I think, is that, you know, Apple knows about it. They're looking into it, and don't expect it unless and until the situation is as untenable for them with Intel as it was with them with PowerPC, or the benefits are so staggering that no sane person would turn away from the amount of work required to realize it.
Indeed.
All right, that is behind us. We've dealt with the crazy for the week. What was I going to ask you next? Ali, I was going to ask you about the best apps for the week. What have you been working on?
Oh, let's see. So
you had PDFs.
Yeah, PDF apps. I did a roundup of that for the iPad. I recently had some friends ask me about that. My girlfriend's also a realtor, and she lives and breathes inside of those for contracts and all kinds of good stuff. So the ones I included in that I think are pretty much the best ones available right now, PDF Expert 5 by Riaddle. That's one of my favorites. It's also one of our editor's choice. The thing I love about PDF Expert 5 is the review mode. You can actually, for anyone that annotates heavily or has to make notes and send things back, PDF Expert 5 has a beautiful review mode. Basically, it turns your PDF into a word processor document. So you can tap blocks of texts, basically edit them exactly as you would if you launched them in Pages or Microsoft Office. And then it changes, or it doesn't change the PDF, it just notates your corrections in a different color as a smart annotation. So then when you send it back, it doesn't destroy any of the original text in the PDF, but someone can see the changes that you made, you can see them. So that was the one out of that roundup that really stood out to me. The other ones I included are Good Reader 4. That one pretty much supports pulling documents.
It's a Swiss Army knife.
Huh?
It's a Swiss Army knife.
Okay.
It does everything.
Yeah, pretty much. It is. You can pull from anything with that. URLs, FTP, SFTP, WebDAV, any cloud storage. You can do pretty much virtually anything in that. So there's a little bit of a learning curve there. It's not as easy to use. I don't think the user interface is as nice as some of the others, but if you're up for that challenge, there's pretty much anything you'd want to do to a PDF you can do in that app. The other ones I included are iAnnotate, PDF Pen. Those two both. PDF Pen is one of the only ones that can sync back and forth between your Mac. So if you do a lot of editing or working with PDFs on your Mac as well, PDF Pen can sync all of your changes, markups between iOS devices and your Mac.
Yeah, I like a lot of those. I use PDF Pen. I use PDF Experts. I've used them very recently. I just filled out a new application for a CMS system, and I used the PDF Pen to do that. The hardest one I've had to do was when I applied for my what is that called? The thing that lets you go back and forth between my Nexus card, because the government's fields were so messed up that almost nobody could handle it. But pretty much they all do a great job now.
Yeah, all of them seem to do really well with fillable forms. I pulled a bunch from a bunch of different sources, and they all seem to handle that pretty well. So that seems to be less of an issue nowadays.
Peter, you looked at retro arcade games for the Mac?
Yes, indeed. I found a whole bunch that I really love. Some stuff that's like straight old school ports. Things like Pac-Man, for example. You can download Pac-Man for $5 from the Mac App Store, and NBA Jam, which is an absolute classic. You know, started life as a coin-op game, later went to 16-bit consoles, and it's been bouncing around ever since. EA did a decent job with that one. There are a few original ones too, like Pangea Arcade, for example, which is actually a collection of 3 games that are like Missile Command, Asteroids, and Centipede, but completely updated for modern systems with 3D graphics and fancy sound effects and the whole 9 yards. And what's really kind of cool about that one is that if you've got those red-blue 3D glasses that you used to get in the back of comic books and so on, the cardboard glasses, it will actually do that 3D anaglyph display, so you can have 3D graphics on your Mac without having an Oculus VR headset hooked up to it. Plus, I found some other stuff that I just really loved, like the old Laserdisc games have made a comeback on the Mac, like Space Ace and Dragon's Lair. Those were the first 50-cent arcade games that I ever remember playing when I was a kid.
I spent so much money on this stuff, Peter.
I know, seriously. And then there are a few others like Raid N Legacy, which is a straight-up port of 4 of the Raid N games, which are shmups, shoot-em-ups. A lot of fun, and of course, no arcade game list is complete without pinball, because pinball has got to be a mainstay of any arcade. And I've got one of the best here, Farsight Studios Pinball Arcade. Costs you $10. Comes with 4 tables. You can download additional tables from them as in-app purchases, and they have licensed real-world tables. These aren't just I'm going to create a pinball table. These are meticulously recreated virtual representations of classic tables that were created by Williams, Bally, Stern Pinball, and Gottlieb. So lots of fun there. And then a couple of original ones too, like Jets and Guns Gold, for example. Now, I've been playing this game for close to a decade, and I'm still not sick of it. It is a bullet hell shooter. It's a side scroller that is just lots of fun. It's got a great soundtrack, terrific graphics. And Air Attack, which is also available for iOS. And if it's a little bit like 1942, if you like the sort of game where you're flying an old World War II style aircraft over stuff, and you're bombing everything in sight and shooting down all the planes you can. Air Attack is cool, but it's updated. It uses the Unity game engine, so it's got updated graphics, and it's a lot of fun to play, and it supports a gamepad too, which is kind of nice.
Awesome. I'm gonna be spending a lot of my weekend doing these, but luckily not a lot of my quarters.
Yes. Just real, or just dollars and $10 and so on there. So you got to get your money's worth.
Love it. Allie, you also looked at iPhone apps for contractors?
I did. We recently had some friends and some relatives getting contract work done. We also did too. And one thing I found with most contractors is they're not very good at organization. I don't know what that is across the board, but one of them actually asked me if I had some app suggestions. So I took a look at a lot of these. The biggest thing for them seems to be estimates, invoices, time tracking, keeping track of workers. So I included a couple that kind of encompassed how to get organized. So Fantastical 2 I included because it is a much more comprehensive calendar app. It combines your calendars and reminders into one. We've talked about Fantastical numerous times. I think most of us here at iMore use it. It's a very versatile solution. It supports natural language selection, keyboard shortcuts for iPad, tons of stuff. So you can make lists, all kinds of stuff there. Wunderlist, I included that because the Wunderlist just got updated to version 3. And I always like the fact that Wunderlist pretty much allows you to do a lot of things for free. So a lot of other apps you have to subscribe to. There are in-app purchases and subscription models, but you can make lists, add to-dos, share them with other people, share lists. It makes it really easy to just create a list for a project and then start assigning tasks to people. And when they mark them off, you know it's done. They can leave notes on things, you get notifications. So it's a really great list-making tool. It's not hard to use. I think last week we talked about hours time tracking by Tappity. I included that here too because it's a really great time tracking app, and a lot of contractors subcontract things out or just need to get better at time management, like most of us probably do. So I included hours. You can basically block out and figure out where you're spending your time, where you could be spending more time. It's just a great all-around time management app. You can also send invoices through there. So if you're a subcontractor, you can actually bill for your time right through that app. Just start a timer when you're starting, and then when you're done, stop it and send an invoice to whoever you're billing. Joist estimating and invoicing is actually created for contractors. You can create estimates, invoices. You can save frequently used items and types of labor, so you can add them quickly later. You can email estimates and invoices right from the app, so you can pretty much be walking through a home and just basically tally things up and send an estimate from right there. That's great for bids and other situations where you need to get stuff out quickly. And the last one I included was a calculator called Construction Master Pro. A lot of these calculations are way over my head, but it'll do pretty much anything. You can do pitches for roofs with this. You can do conversions for perimeters, diagonals, feet, inches, pretty much everything you'd need to do. There are also a lot of definitions and lots of walkthroughs for the different types of calculations it can do. So I think those are pretty much a pretty good overall list that I would recommend, at least to get started for contractors.
Awesome. There's a couple other things in app news that I sort of wanted to pull aside. I went out to dinner the other day, and it was a really nice restaurant, and I wanted to check into it on Foursquare, and I went there and I hit the check-in button, and I said, "Oh no, you have to download Swarm." So I deleted Foursquare. And then they just updated, I think it was yesterday, to a new app, which is basically Yelp in a Foursquare wrapper. And Allie and I were talking about this because, Facebook is now forcing you to go to Messenger instead of using the Facebook app to send messages. And Allie was saying that, likewise, Google Docs, Google Drive is now, they want you to download Google Docs and Google, soon-to-be Google Sheets and Google whatever the presentation thing is called. The Google thing I cut some slack to because they're integrating QuickBooks, and Apple and Microsoft do all their apps separately too. And I'd rather have 3 really good apps because documents are heavy lifting, especially on mobile. But I don't understand the Foursquare thing, Ali. I mean, Foursquare was launched as a way for you to check into places and become the mayor. And now they want it to be Yelp, and that's fine. But it seems to me that if you're going to do that, you should split out the Yelp functionality into the new app and not tell people who've always been using Foursquare that they've got to now use what looks to be, for all intents and purposes, an unrelated product in Swarm.
I think I'm not a huge fan of splitting out apps. I would rather have an all-in-one solution. I wrote an article a while back about why I thought Foursquare was so great for travel. And I still think it is, and I think that the way that they've structured the new app will make it even better as far as discovering new places and traveling and getting tips. But I'm concerned that them splitting it into two apps is going to, like in your situation, it's going to alienate users. I don't understand that with Facebook either. I don't understand. There has to be, I don't know what the benefit is of them splitting apps like that. With Swarm, the marketing for that confuses me because there's no correlation. When you launch the two apps, they look and feel completely different. So I don't feel like there's a very cohesive branding package there, and I don't know if that's part of the problem, but I'm not for the splitting things out of apps either, and I think that I don't know. I'm kind of torn on Foursquare. I can kind of understand why they did it, but I don't understand why it needed to be done in two separate packages.
For me, I wanted to use Foursquare when I was traveling, like you did, but I also wanted to be able to check in because that's how I remember places it was a quick way to remember places that I thought were really good and I'd want to come back to at some point. And also, like Peter, these are not small, struggling indie developers who could barely, keep up with one app or want to keep apps separate. These are some of the biggest internet companies in the world, and it seems to me like they could provide bare bones functionality inside Facebook, inside Foursquare, to keep people who are used to using it, who are habituated to using it in that fashion, happy, and then say, but if you want, you can go to these other apps and get an even better experience.
Yep. I mean, I don't know what else you want me to say. It seems kind of ridiculous that they're breaking this stuff out, into these individual apps. But that's what they decided to do.
I only ever want to give you a chance to rant if that's what you want, Peter.
Yeah, but you know what? In the same token, I have trouble because it's funny because I've had conversations with people going, why are they doing it this way?
Because
it's a free app. Download it and get over it and get on with your life.
I'm not. I'm deleting it. I'm getting on with my Foursquare free life.
There you go.
And that I think that's a justifiable reaction to it. If I don't want to use their secondary app, I can just decide not to use the Surface. And I wonder how big, because I've seen a lot of people complaining about this specifically with. Messenger maybe not so much, but specifically with Foursquare. And it still seems to me that if your website does something, your app should do it. And Facebook's strategy was different. Facebook actually hired Eric Tsang from Google, and they were going to make, at least as far as I know, a Facebook phone, and they wanted to get apps ready for that phone.
Oh, wait a minute. Hang on for a second. Your website should do the same thing that your app does?
Well, if you're Facebook, you have functionality.
Kind of like being able to search stuff in the iMore app?
Well, so here's the thing. You have certain functionality in a social networking app, and that functionality should be pushed down to the app. For the iMore app, we could do search. The problem with it is that iMore is a giant website, and we'd have to find a way to put all that data on your phone.
On your phone, right? Yeah. Exactly. And maybe some of those scalability issues, affect social media companies' ability to do the same thing, or for that matter, desire to do the same thing. Stick all their eggs in one basket.
Well, I think it's always what we did is we deliberately chose not to put that feature in rather than provide a bad version of that feature. I think once you put a feature in, though, taking it away from people is always harder. It's sort of like, once you lower prices, it's harder to raise prices. It's always much easier to go down. It's always much easier to add features than it is to take away features because then you start to deal with people's I'm used to going to Foursquare for that. It's going to take me a while to reprogram, and if I have to reprogram, maybe I'll check and see if Facebook check-ins are better. Or, I was going to say Koala check-ins, but, that's basically Facebook check-ins now. Or if I have to go and switch to Messenger, maybe I'll see if WhatsApp is better. People switch during transition periods. People switch to Mac during Vista. And I think if you have those Vista moments, and I should preface it by saying it's always easier to retain a customer than it is to acquire a new customer. The cost of acquisition is always higher than the cost of retention. Ryan Block phone calls notwithstanding. So you want to make that as easy as possible. And if you give people a possible chance for X exit, some percentage of those people are going to choose exit, and you've got to factor that into the value of that decision for your app.
I'll agree with that, and I think that yeah, no, actually, I will agree with that, and I don't really have anything else to add to it. You're right. The cost of retention is lower than the cost of getting a new customer acquisition, and we're seeing that again on the Mac side. We saw it in Vista a little bit. We're seeing it even more now with Windows 8.
Yeah.
So that definitely happens.
A couple other things to mention quickly. We've also Apple TV is getting NFL stuff. I don't understand this American four down football, but apparently there's a new NFL app, and you can use it on your Apple TV as well. And apparently that's a big deal because people want their sports.
Yes, people love their hand egg here in the United States.
Their hand egg, awesome. Yeah, there's been a bunch of other app updates. You can always go to imore.com/apps to find out everything that's happening in the app world. You can go to imore.com/thebest. imore.com/best to see best apps, best accessories, best games, all the Conan what is best in life stuff. There was one other thing I wanted to mention, and I'll just pull that back up here. Oh yeah, that's ratings. We've been having this talk internally about how we rate apps. We haven't used ratings at iMore for a long time. We used to use a 5-star scale, and I sat down to watch Snowpiercer earlier this week, and it had 95% on Rotten Tomatoes. And please don't write in again and try to explain to me what Rotten Tomatoes percentages means. I know exactly what they mean. It's percentage of freshness or unfreshness. I forget the term that they staleness, grossness, mold and mildewous. Anyway, so you have a percentage of freshness, which is the amount of critics that actually like the movie. So it's a satisfaction index. And this was 95%, so I watched it, and it was not a good movie. Like, I'm not saying it was a bad movie, but it was a typical post-apocalyptic movie full of plot holes and silly ideas, and that's fine if I thought I was going to watch that movie, but it was way oversold to me. So I didn't enjoy it as much as I could have because my expectations were misaligned. If it was like Expendables 3 and I knew exactly what I was getting, I would have just had a fun time. And we've been talking about this kind of stuff at iMore for a long time. Like, how do we set expectations, and how do people know what a review is? If Peter gives an app 4 stars, what does that mean? If he gives an app 5 stars, what does that mean? What if a better app comes along? What if that app gets updated? It's all very nebulous. And I heard this talk at WWDC from Mike Stern, who's their user interface evangelist, and he explained what basically he looks for in order to figure out if an interface is good. And I thought it would make an incredibly good review system in general. We haven't finalized it yet, but the sort of thing that we're looking at is for ratings to actually mean something. So, for example, like let's just say we use 5 stars. One of those stars would be for usability, like how easy, or utility. Does the app do what it says it does? How well does it do it? Is it focused? Everything around the functionality and features of the app. Another one might be, how easy is the app to pick up and start using? How intuitive is the navigation? How well laid out are the controls? Another one might be design. Is it good looking? Are the interactions enjoyable? Do you have fun using the app? It's, all those sorts of things. Another one might be accessibility. To Peter's point earlier, does someone who has accessibility issues, is the app available to them? Is it inclusive? Is it easy for people of all different kinds of backgrounds to use? And all of those, I think, as long as we properly define the criteria that we're using, could lead to a more relevant and more valuable rating system. I don't know if you guys have any strong feelings on this yet. I know it's still early days.
I do. I think that makes more sense to me than just, a lot of times reviews are heavily opinion. So if you basically make them more objective, I feel like that's better for us. I know for me, digging through apps, one might be better for me than it would be for Peter. So I think if you're more objective about it, I think that makes more sense and would be more valuable for users.
Yeah, how do you handle this traditionally in gaming, Peter? Was there a lot of criteria pre-established?
Yeah, well, I mean, when I started writing reviews for Macworld, for example, there were a pre-established set of criteria to use for reviews in general. Having said that, I think that all review systems are flawed. I've never found one that I think is completely foolproof or completely objective, because reviews are by their definition subjective. So. You know, you can judge on criteria of stability or user interface, sort of, but you know, at the end of the day, it only means so much.
It's still going to be opinion, no matter how you spin it.
Yep.
We can make them a little bit more objective, but what Peter thinks is pretty, I might not think is pretty.
Well, that's the thing. So I mean, there's the scale system, like 5 stars or 10 stars, where you give them, you know, this is a 1 out of 10, this is a 10 out of 10, and relatively speaking, an app that gets 5 stars should not be as good as an app that gets 10 stars. But then you have the more like-dislike systems, like the famous thumbs up or thumbs down. And if you have multiple people, it can be 2 thumbs up or 2 thumbs down, where it's not, you don't get any sense of how much a person liked it, but you get a sense of whether they liked it or not. You know, maybe you can cheat and say thumbs in the middle. And I'm not sure what's more useful to people. Like, first of all, like, we haven't used them in a while because I thought they weren't useful, that it was better for someone to look at a conclusion of a review or some part of the review and have an opinion expressed to them. But there's something to be said for glanceable information. If people just look at it quickly, how do we get them to know that this, wait, stop, this app is actually worth your time? Amazon ratings are interesting because people put reviews along with them. So I almost always look at the 5-star reviews and the 1-star reviews because I want to see who really loved it and I want to see who really hated it and why. App Store reviews are harder. And the one thing is, like, what does it mean? Like, very few reviewers, a lot of people who, I should separate that. Like people who review for a living, people who, like Peter, were game reviewers and stuff, they very seldom give 1 or 2-star reviews. They just choose not to review that thing. Where people on iTunes and people on Amazon, if they buy it and they feel jilted in some way, they'll go and leave a 1-star, 2-star review. So you have the like and dislike. You can actually negative something, like 1 thumb down. I'm not saying this isn't good. I'm saying this is bad. Is a 1-star review, is a 2-star review bad? I mean, a 2-star review is better than a 1-star review. It gets incredibly complicated to me, and I think there should be a way to simplify this for people.
I like the idea of taking votes away from other people. You know, the thumbs down review. Being a net negative. I've said this about voting for years. That we should be, instead of having to vote for a candidate that we dislike or that we like, that we dislike the least, we should be able to not vote for a candidate and take a vote away from them.
I like you so. I hate you so much. I'm not only going to give up my right to vote, but I'm going to take it away from somebody else.
Take it away from somebody else. Exactly right.
Anyway, all this to say, I wrote a little bit about this last week, and I'll be continuing to write about it as we work our way towards a system. Peter, what was your not safe for work this week?
This past week,
yes.
Or the one coming up?
The past week, I think, was healthcare, right?
Yeah, this past week I ranted about healthcare a little bit because of stuff that's been going on in my life and my family's life. I've been exposed to a lot of doctors' offices lately, and I just having to deal with them and their bureaucracy. I have a very jaded opinion about how Apple's health functionality in iOS 8 is really going to affect anything. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
So, iOS 8 Health is a great idea, and I'm sure that it's going to make it really handy to sort of consolidate all of the data that you've collected in your fitness apps all in one place. And if you're using some kind of wearable, whether it's a mythical Apple iWatch or a Fitbit or an Up or whatever it might be, I'm sure it's going to make your life a lot better. But, Apple also touts the fact that iOS 8 Health can send diagnostic information to your doctor, so your doctor can review your results as well. That's predicated, first of all, on the assumption that your doctor can actually take the time to analyze or synthesize any of this data. And the way that healthcare is run, at least in the United States, increasingly doctors have less time to manage any kind of patient relationships whatsoever because so many insurance companies put burdens on them in terms of what their patient load has to be and how many patients they have to see. But that's only scratching the surface of it. The fact of the matter is that electronic medical records, electronic health records, the whole system is a mess from top to bottom. Data is siloed incredibly tightly, and it's done because of federal compliance guidelines, HIPAA, exactly. It's done because of state compliance guidelines. It's done because the companies that the electronic or the medical IT firms that have come up with these systems have it in their vested interest to silo the data, to not let it escape, because they want to get the healthcare companies that they're working with into very lucrative maintenance contracts. Now, that's not to say that there is no hope on the horizon for any of this changing. There are systems that are being put in place in some hospitals and some healthcare systems that provide a little bit more openness, a little bit more universal record keeping, but I just don't think that this is a nut that Apple can crack very easily. It's certainly not going to be fixed on day one when iOS 8 ships. That's for damn sure. If you're lucky enough to have a medical provider, like somebody at Mayo Clinic, for example, that's actually partnering with Apple with iOS 8, that's one thing. But I think for the rest of us, it's going to be a long road to hoe before we see this kind of access available to everyone and their doctor.
Now I'm depressed.
Sorry.
Well, they have colorful carrot icons.
Yes. Colorful carrot icons are good, especially if you're a bunny.
Yeah, hopefully it'll start moving this forward. I mean, we have an official healthcare system, which is really a medical care system because there's no preventative health like there is in some Scandinavian countries, but it's a huge. It means it takes a huge amount of stress off of the average Canadian's life, and we'll see how well the health app does with that.
Which is why you guys eat maple sugar candy and poutine and other incredibly unhealthy things.
All right, it is time for our Q&A. I'll start with Tobias. He says, do you know if Apple has worked on its SMB service in Yosemite? At work, we have huge problems with Mavericks and NetApps. Thanks. I have not looked at this yet, Peter. Have you?
Say that again?
Do you know if Apple has worked on its SMB services in Yosemite? I guess that's small, medium business.
I do not know. I know that SMB services were a mess in Mavericks, and a lot of people were upset because Apple changed the stack and broke compatibility. Now, for people who don't know what SMB is, it's the way that most Windows systems talk to each other for file sharing. Right? Yeah, exactly. I don't know offhand how it's changed in Yosemite, but I'll look into it for sure.
All right, awesome. Now we have a question from Jonathan. Do you think Apple will do anything to differentiate iPhone models aside from screen size, i.e., will one be faster, will it have a better resolution? We've talked about this a lot on past shows. Peter and I, and I'd be interested to get Ali's opinion, Peter and I were both hoping that all it would be was screen size, like with the iPad Air versus the iPad Mini. You can buy the bigger one if you want to spend an extra $100, and that's it. But there are also rumors that the bigger one, because it's bigger, might get a better camera, or it might have longer battery life, or there might be some other differentiating feature. Maybe it will have more pixels because they can fit them in. Ali, do you have an opinion on this?
I think for Apple, typically it's about usability, not spec wars. I think that's something that I don't think we'd see from Apple. I think at the most you might see a different screen resolution, like you said, because you can do that when you have a bigger screen, and it would make sense to maybe do that. It might drive up costs, though. So besides screen size and maybe resolution, I can't see that being something Apple would do. If they were going to do that, I would think they would have leveraged the iPad Air a little bit above the iPad Mini with Retina display.
All right, we have a question from Neil. I'm going to send this to Peter because I think his answer will be the funniest. Microsoft is building a store on Fifth Avenue next to the Apple Store. Will that matter, Peter?
No. Good for Microsoft. Microsoft has had a habit of finding where, not just a habit, they've actually got a strategy of finding wherever there's an Apple store and building a Microsoft store somewhere in its proximity. So this actually shouldn't surprise anyone.
I've heard, and I don't know, apparently this is true. Victoria's Secret does the same thing. They always want to get a mall location across from an Apple store if they can.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, that's got my mind going places it shouldn't, but interesting.
Well, I mean, we've heard this before. Like, there are companies who go near Starbucks, or they go near other companies that they think spend a lot of money on finding good retail locations, so that they don't have to spend the money on the same thing.
Yeah, and it makes sense, right? Let's let somebody else do our market research for us. So we can I don't know, buy more cocaine. I don't have any idea.
Go straight to cocaine. Every time Peter has a problem, it goes straight to cocaine.
Hey, look, when you're down on the ground.
That's not the one they made legal, Peter.
Oh, that's right.
Ali, we see lots of iPhone 6 4.7-inch part leaks. Why not any iPhone 5.5-inch part leaks if it may be released around the same time frame? That's from Robert. That's a good question.
I'm still not completely sold on a 5.5-inch iPhone. Partially because it makes me want to cry because I don't like phones that large and I would not use it. I don't know. I think that I don't think it'll be released around the same time. So I don't think we're going to see that in September. So that might be why. I haven't seen any part leaks or anything come from suppliers, at least that was legitimate. I think someone did post supposed mock-ups or prototypes or dummy prototypes of those 4.7 and 5.5 next to a 4-inch iPhone. I don't remember who that was that posted those, but I think they were more just dummy prototypes that a case manufacturer had. I don't know. I'm still trying not to believe that Apple will release a 5.5-inch iPhone.
All right, Tim is asking, Peter, what are the odds of just an upgrade to the Thunderbolt display without going 4K? 4K seems to be expensive when it comes to video card requirements. I think you've actually asked specifically for that in the past.
Yeah, I've suggested that when Apple updates the Thunderbolt display that it really needs to go to 4K. What's the likelihood that you would get a Thunderbolt 2 display but not 4K? At this point, I can't think that Apple would really think that there's a big market for a non-4K display, but I could be wrong on this.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think they'll go 4K.
Yeah, exactly. It's such a big selling point to the Mac Pro, and the Mac Pro is one of the main machines that they'd be aiming a Thunderbolt display at because, quite frankly, it's an expensive display and it's got a pretty small niche within Apple's product segment.
Ali, follow-up question. I go to you because for those of you who don't remember, Ali is a genius when it comes to parts and disassembling and reassembling things. This is also from Robert. It's a follow-up. Same thing. What about iWatch? Shouldn't we be seeing leaks of iWatch parts if it's really coming in October? I will preface this by saying that Apple is usually really good at keeping new products secret. Like we didn't see iPad parts leaks until the iPad event. Those leaks come when they do upgrade devices. I don't know what the magic is with new products, but it seems it might even be the reason why the iPhablet, and yes, I'm using the word iPhablet just to watch people's heads explode, isn't leaking because it might be considered a new product and that's easier for them to lock down.
I think a lot of it has to do with, too, that I don't think some part manufacturers know what they're looking at or know what they're looking for. You would be surprised how many part manufacturers or part suppliers really don't know the internals of the phone or different parts and circuit boards and really what they're looking at. So with the iPad, I think that might have been the case. With a larger phone, a lot of those components would probably be similar. So I don't really know why we haven't seen any, but I would probably attribute it to being a new product or that suppliers just don't really know what they're looking at.
I remember before the iPad mini was announced and it was still just a rumor, people kept leaking iPad mini screens and Ali would look at them and go, it's a Kindle Fire, it's a BlackBerry Playbook.
Yeah, they would. A lot of people would just find parts that were similar, but if you actually zoom in on a lot of those cables, you can easily tell what's real and what's fake by Googling the part numbers. So, and they'll show up on some obscure message board or something. I know a lot of part leakers are some of the ones that are more synonymous with Apple leaks. They just basically troll part forums all day long, like Alibaba and some of the other ones, and they find those photos and send them in. So that's pretty much how that gets done.
All right, last question. Apple, I'll preface by saying Apple earlier, Mark Gurman from 9to5Mac reported that Apple hired yet another Yves Saint Laurent executive, this time they're the president of EU operations, and she's joining the former CEO of Yves Saint Laurent, who now is working for Tim Cook on special projects. And the rumor is they're working on retail specifically for wearables because they might want to sell Apple's wearable as more of a fashion, not maybe more of a fashion accessory, but they need to tie into fashion as a way to grow and better sell these things. I think this is smart for Apple. I mean, Apple's been a consumer electronic brand for a long time, but they're making so much money, and it's unclear how much more money they can make out of being a straight consumer electronics company. Once you have all the money in one area, you've got to look to another area to get even more of the money. And just making more iPhones. I mean, they will saturate at some point. It's inevitable. But if they become more of a fashion brand, more of a lifestyle brand, even if they don't sell T-shirts, which they only do at their company store, even if they don't, sell fancy water bottles or something, the idea that Apple is providing you with everything that your connected life needs, I think, could be a gateway to greater product lines for them, starting with wearables. And wearables. Apple has wearables now. iPod Shuffles and iPod Nanos are fairly wearable. They've even had clips on them at various points of time. And having wearables that run iOS and connect to iCloud is very valuable. But they're doing HomeKit, and they're doing the Health Kit that Peter mentioned. They're going to be tying into so many things, and some of those things are going to be parts of people's lives that need to be more fashionable than just a beautiful aluminum shell with an Apple logo on it, or at least will have to be sold using language that goes with high-end retailers, luxury brands, and things like that. So I think it's just smart that when you have someone like Angela Ahrendts taking over retail, that you bring in these people who are used to making Peter and Ali and I give over our hard-earned money for objects of lust and or questionable real value, but immense. What's the right word when you buy something just because you want to have it?
Fashion statement?
Yeah, extrinsic, not intrinsic. I don't know. I'm not smart enough to determine these actual words that get put into sentences and stuff. But unless you guys disagree, I think that this kind of stuff, it will only help. Apple could lose focus. They could flub it. But I think hiring these executives at least give them a shot at doing something a little bit more aspirational with Apple.
Oh, for sure. I think there's a huge growth opportunity, especially with the fashion industry. And I mean, I don't know, you walk through Harrods in London or Suffrages, and there are people that pay £2,200 for a gold-plated iPhone. So I think positioning themselves with people who know the retail industry and that can bring that, I think Beats might play an important role there, because I think Peter would agree it's not about audio quality, it's about a fashion statement. It's about being trendy, and I think that the gold iPhone was a step in that direction. I think, Apple has colorful product lines of iPods and the iPhone 5C, and I think it's more of a fashion statement, and if people think it's cool, they're going to buy it. So I think there's a lot of growth opportunity there.
I'm inclined to agree with Ellie.
Yeah, I don't think it's about making, some people have rumored $1,000 iWatches and stuff like that, but I don't think it's about, maybe there will be really high-end products the way there's a Mac Pro sitting on top of all the Macs. There'll be an Uber iOS device or an Uber iWatch or something sitting on top of all those. Really like the supercar analogy, the real aspirational product. But Apple's always been about affordable luxury, and I think that's John Gruber's term for it, where this stuff is amazing. They're amazing construction, amazing build. We've got chamfered edges on gold iPhones, people. That's codename Kardashian. But they're available to people for $100, for $200 on contract, which is attainable from a vast majority of people, and we can see that from the sales. So just making things even more desirable while keeping them attainable, I think, has huge value as well. And with that, I bring this to a close. Peter, if people want to read more of your smart stuff, if they want to follow you on the interwebs, where can they go?
They are welcome to follow me at iMore, of course. You can also find me on Twitter at Flarg, Flargh.
Ali, what about you?
Every day at imore.com and on Twitter at imuggle, and pretty much imuggle on all the things.
On all the social things. You can find me at Rene Ritchie. You can find me on iMore and Mobile Nations. We do the show live every Thursday at 2 p.m. That's 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 p.m. Pacific. If you can't join us live, which really is the best way to join us, because you can make us smarter in the chat room and you can ask us questions and stuff, we are available at any time on iTunes and RSS. Just go to imore.com/iMore show and you can see the listing of all the episodes that you might have missed. I want to thank the chat room. I want to thank everybody who sent in a question. If you do have a question for us, if you want it answered on the air, just put it up on Twitter, #AskIMore, or leave it as a comment to the post, or email it to podcast@imore.com. I also want to remind everyone that we have sponsorships on the show now. We're doing those with our good friends at the Midroll, and they're running a survey. They want to try to help match the show with the best, most interesting, most gorgeous advertisers possible. So if it takes a short survey, it's anonymous, takes no more than 5 minutes. If you complete the survey, you're entered into an ongoing monthly raffle to win a $100 Amazon gift card. They promise not to share or sell your email address. They won't even send you an email unless you win. So please go to www.podsurvey.com/imore. That's www.podsurvey.com/imore. Take the survey, get a chance to win $100 Amazon gift card. I want to thank them. I want to thank you. And I want to thank you, and Peter and you, Ali, as well.
Thank you. You're welcome.